When I started landscaping professionally after graduating from UC Berkeley in 1978, I thought I knew a lot about designing and maintaining beautiful gardens. I realized a little later that I still had a lot to learn. And even in the last 30 years, I've gained so much knowledge and have such a greater understanding that I wish I knew all of that before. Today, I want to share some of these lessons with you so you can build your landscaping knowledge much faster than I have. Starting with something that has completely changed the way residential landscapes are designed all over the country and the world. We used to see much more examples of simple backyards with a clothesline, a rectangular slab of concrete, usually covered with an extension from the house, and a rectangular lawn with shrubs around it. That, I would say, has dramatically changed in the last 30 years. When I first learned about the concept, it's an easy one to accept, but it was considered kind of a California thing, started by people like Thomas Church, expanding the house out into the garden. We're looking at use. We're looking at creating special spaces. We're looking at making the rooms in your house extend out into the landscape and using windows and French doors and such that emphasize this indoor-outdoor relationship. We've used it in our landscapes in a way that makes me more keenly aware of its benefits to our everyday life and benefits to how much use you get out of your landscape. Before, you might have a house designed separately, and then the builder comes independently from anyone doing any landscape works and builds the house, and then a landscape designer comes in and figures out how to integrate what he's left with. Whereas this last 30 years, we've figured out how to integrate from the beginning. Many times designed right along with the house. That's how we did this house that I just built, where it's part of the architecture of the home. The great challenge for the garden designer shouldn't be to make the garden natural, but to make the garden so the people in it will feel natural. If there's one lesson that reshaped my entire career, it wasn't a new design trend or plant. It was finally understanding how much everything depends on what's happening underneath your feet. In my education in landscape architecture, we learned very little about soil, a lot about art, a lot about broad issues, but not much specifically about soil. About 30 years ago or so, the equipment used to analyze soil just progressed dramatically. So the microscopes that were used and made it so the science of soil took major advances. Whereas before, if you went to all the major universities in the United States with soil science departments, you would see that the emphasis was on NPK type studies. So nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, the three macronutrients in soil. What changed is all of a sudden these improvements in equipment allowed soil scientists to realize the importance of life in the soil. And you saw this seismic shift from the NPK type studies to life in the soil type studies. I started noticing it in our own work. We started our business in 1979, and we would, for the first 10 or 15 years, we would encounter a lot of situations where people would call us back after completing a garden, and even though they had an overall satisfaction with the landscape, there would always be certain plants that wouldn't bloom right or wouldn't produce right, and an area of the yard that wouldn't drain right. And obviously, they would have already tried, chemical fertilizer. That was ubiquitous. Everyone tried chemical fertilizer if anything was wrong with anything in their garden, but would get no results. And so they would call us. I was determined to come up with something that I could offer as a solution. And the first thing that came to my mind, let's change the soil. Let's improve the soil. Let's infuse that soil with life. So I started experimenting with, our first product was Optimize. I used that early on in the 90s. And what I was amazed by is time and again it worked. We experimented with a lot of products to change soil to improve results in the landscape. And soil was changing and the landscapes were improving. And that really inspired me to start a whole new company, which we started in the early 2000s with our first product being Soil Optimizer. That's how John and Bob's came to be. And then I had the opportunity to meet Dr. Elaine Ingham a couple of times and other people involved in this industry of infusing soil with life. And that allowed me to come up with some formulations that we continued to perfect and continued to use and continued to see really great results. And now it's kind of a whole movement in the landscape industry and the gardening industry. Once you understand soil, the next thing is water. Many people think watering is simple. 50 years of landscaping has taught me it's one of the easiest ways to ruin a beautiful yard. On one of the very first jobs I did, we got sued for lack of proper drainage. The general contractor graded it, and I should have paid more attention to exactly how it drained, but mounds in front of houses are problems. The very first thing you should do on your site is figure out how you're going to get that to drain properly. Usually drain out to the street or some strategy for delivering water, rainwater and irrigation water, away from the buildings and out either into a street or in an area that can accept the water. Drainage is just one of the biggest things and one of the least studied and understood and appreciated. One of the things that I focused on here at this house is not putting water right around the building. We've got only 5 plants up against the building, and that's outside the master bathroom. You can see here, I'm still got my drainage in mind, even though I put in the lawn and I put in almost all the plants. I've got these white pipes sticking up everywhere, and those white pipes will be drainage inlets. We don't get rain in the summer, so I haven't finished the drainage system. We have that all over the site, and that goes all the way around the lot to the street, and we deliver that water away from the building. The other ways water is important, obviously, is in irrigation, and that has changed dramatically in 30 years. I think mostly improved, although with some bumps along the way. You can now buy weather-based irrigation controllers. You can buy irrigation controllers that are not only weather-based, but you can have input with your phone. Swing joints that allow us to put those heads exactly where we want them. And much more emphasis on drip irrigation, like in this landscape I'm standing in. We have sprays on the lawn, everything else is drip, which delivers water slowly, is good for the plants, good for water conservation. If we're focusing the water only where the plants are, we're cutting down on a weed problem. And we advanced to drip systems where a lot of people complain about squirrels and such eating their drip tubing. Here's a type of system where there is no drip tubing, but it's drip irrigation. This was a park we did where the entire underground irrigation is all with class 200 PVC pipe, and everywhere we want an emitter, we come up with flexible PVC and an emitter right at the plant. Lots and lots of changes in 30 years. That's why I advocate on these videos for getting some help to design your irrigation system and maybe even help in installing it. Now here's where I know I will surprise some people, because some of this next lesson might go against some advice you hear all the time. Native plants aren't a panacea, even though they are fantastic. And I'd say this is an area that has undergone a lot of change in the last 30 years. When I came out of college in 1978, this might amaze some of you youngsters out there, but native plants were big on my mind, and native plant gardens was something I really learned about as a major in landscape architecture and wanted to focus on here in my hometown of Fresno, and we did that. We did gardens only with California natives for some time. That allowed me to really experience the ups and the downs. It's not just finding California natives and planting them and saying, now we don't have to do anything. We're extremely proud of our Carpentaria californica, which only grows in one place in the world in a native situation, in Fresno County. Not too far from us, really close to us, but at a little different elevation. You can grow it here, but it doesn't thrive like you would want it to thrive if you want to just walk away from it, and you might need to give it a little afternoon shade. Those types of things are realities when you're building native plant gardens. And I'd say everyone can agree, particularly in native habitats we should be planting native plants. But we're not always dealing in native habitats. A lot of times we're dealing in urban situations which have been changed dramatically and are surrounded by asphalt and concrete. And you can find examples of adapted trees and plants that are fantastic in those areas and perhaps better than native plants. Adapted plants also having a space in this world and not necessarily damaging big ecosystems. There are adapted plants that are good for nature and good for beneficials and good for landscapes that we want to build without having to spray chemicals and spray fungicides. I think it's a really interesting issue and a really big issue, this issue of native plants, but not so straightforward as we can say you should just be planting natives. A lot of adapted plants are perfectly suited. Plus, it doesn't address native to exactly where. To find natives right to my area here would be difficult other than along waterways. It's a more complex issue than many make it out to be. I'm all in favor of planting natives where they're appropriate and where they are the best. After walking through hundreds of landscapes over the years, I noticed something. The best ones don't stay beautiful because the homeowners work harder. Many of them stay beautiful because they were designed smarter. So if you want a beautiful landscape that lasts and lasts and lasts, it starts with proper planning. That is something that has been driven home to me more and more as the older I get, although I'm not old yet. I think overplanting is popular with landscape professionals, and it can be done in a skillful way. I think I tend to underplant a little. I like giving them plenty of room to grow and being very conservative on the proximity of trees to houses and to paving, or if they are close to paving, to use root barriers properly installed. The design is an important part of a landscape aging gracefully. Which plants and how many plants we use. I prefer a look where you allow plants to attain their natural form, not where you're clubbing them into submission. And so that does involve proper planning and some research into specifically what plants you're going to use, how big they get, how wide they get. I think you will find with many plants, their true beauty is best exhibited if you allow them to see their form. And if you don't see their form because you're pruning the sides or the top off, then it doesn't even matter what plant you pick because they're all going to look very similar. I don't think it's reflection of a poorly designed landscape that now and then you will have to make changes because things happen, exposures are different than you expected, plants perform maybe a little differently every 5 to 10 years, having to change something or prune something a little differently. A landscape should have a certain amount of that evolution and changing, so I don't want to infer that you do a proper design and then never touch it. But still, how much you touch it is dependent on how skillful that original design is done. I like to focus on the soil, get that soil to be as healthy as possible so we get those plants to grow faster than you ever thought they could grow and allowing them to attain their natural form. That, to me, is the definition of a well-planned, long-lasting, low-maintenance, almost sustainable garden. Experience has taught Chip and I that some of the most common landscaping advice isn't always the best advice. So if you want to avoid some of the biggest mistakes Chip and I see homeowners making today, click on that video right here on your screen. Chip and I break down the most common landscaping myths that decades as a landscape professional have taught me just are not true.